So Denise Madre is a bibliophile with a BA in English. She's a dedicated writer, an editor, and a champion of the Oxford comma. After more than a decade of experience, she founded Prose Without Thorns, an editing firm helping rising and returning writers produce their best work. Through actionable feedback and thoughtful editing, Denise produces engaging manuscripts that enhance her clients' uniqueness and creativity. She has worked with over 100 projects. Denise, welcome to the networking studio. This is an amazing community. It's a very casual, as I mentioned, a very casual meeting. If anybody has any questions for Denise, let's stick them in the chat and so she can start addressing them as she feels. But Denise, I'm going to let you, I want to read one more thing before I forget, because I thought this was fascinating. When I asked Denise, what is one fun thing people would never know about you? And she says, I have 7 children and 6 grandchildren, which to me blew me away. And where are you getting the time to do these amazing TikTok videos and your editing work and your writing work? I'm hoping you're going to share that secret with us towards the end of our conversation. But welcome to our networking studio, and take it away.
So thanks for that welcome, Linda. I'm honored to be here. Anytime anybody wants to hear me run my mouth, I'm honored to do that. I tend to do it in empty rooms, and now TikTok allows me to share my ramblings with the world. And so I appreciate y'all welcoming me into your space. I will actually get to the family question right now. It's easy to deal with having 7 children when you marry someone who has 5. So my husband was a single father of 5, divorced father of 5 when I met him. His children were between the ages of 8 and 14 when we got married. So I went from 0 to 5 like that. Everyone thought that was a very sane decision. And so then we had 2 more children together. And through my oldest 3, who are in their 30s, I have 6 grandbabies who call me Mima, with an open A, not a maw, because maw is a septuagenarian and she sits on her porch all day. I'm too young for that. But that's how you do it. You have your children who are in their 20s and 30s, and they don't impact your daily schedule, at least not often. So, but yeah, I'm excited to come in and talk to y'all about sensitivity reading. For context, I am an editor primarily, which means I talk to writers about their end of the process. So this is new for me as well, talking to editors about what to do when you have a manuscript in front of you that you think can benefit from sensitivity reading. If you're not familiar with sensitivity reading or how to do it, if you should do it. We've only got 45 minutes an hour to talk, but I talk really fast. So I'm going to get through a good deal of it. I would like to start with this definition that I'm going to put in the chat for how I define sensitivity reading. And that is, it's a mouthful, but we're going to break it down. So it's the process of encouraging authentic and respectful representations of marginalized people and cultures by identifying and addressing stereotypes, ignorance, offensive language and depictions, unconscious bias, and other harmful choices. So you may need to take a deep breath after reading that all in one fell swoop, but we're going to break that down. First of all, sensitivity reading is a process. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to take notes because I have a PDF I'm going to send you at the end. So you can write down stuff that I say, but there's going to be a PDF, so surprise. First of all, sensitivity reading is a process. And that's important for us to know on the editor side, because sometimes we feel like, I got to catch everything. And it's like, well, every manuscript is different. Every experience is different. And so coming into it, understanding that it's a process for you, as well as a process for the author who's receiving your feedback, can be really helpful. It is the process of encouraging. Sometimes when we're talking about sensitive topics, especially one that kind of makes you kind of go, what? There's a part of you that may kind of rise up a bit because we're editors, but we are also human. And so it's important to realize that when we're giving our feedback, it's never to try to tell someone what to do. As I say on my page all the time, which Linda has probably heard a dozen times by now, you have the RIGHT to WRITE, whatever you want. And so you have to believe that someone coming to you for sensitivity editing or sensitivity reading is at least open to getting your feedback. But if you're coming at it from a point of encouragement, that's a better place to come from rather than correction, even though they kind of go together, you know what you're doing, but you want to think of it as encouragement, not correction. And that After that, it's a process of encouraging authentic and respectful representation. I am one Black woman, just one. There are many of us. All of you represent different groups, different identities. You are one of one, which means if someone decided they wanted to write, let's say, a Black woman with 7 kids, 3 of whom are autistic, they could write me, they could write any number of people. So it's not about any one character representing all people. It's about making sure that this representation feels authentic. And that starts with respecting the group that they're going to write about, which is something that you'll be able to kind of tell as you're going through the process. And even when you speak to that author directly, which we'll get into in a minute. So you want to make sure that you're encouraging authentic and respectful representation of marginalized groups, people and culture, marginalized people and cultures. This is not to say that folk can write non-marginalized groups any way that they want, although you have the RIGHP, the WRP, whatever you want. But the point is, when it comes to non-marginalized groups, we kind of understand that they're not monolithic. We don't think, for example, to return to one of my favorite shows, we don't confuse Monica and Phoebe or Rachel and Phoebe because we understand that all white women live in New York are not all the same. So there's not the same pressure to make sure that this is the white woman or the thin person because we understand that they're different. When it comes to marginalized groups, which are groups where they have been oppressed or minimized or pushed aside or victims of prejudice because of some aspect of their identity, it's a lot easier and a lot more common for someone to think, oh, well, my Black neighbor's like that, so I guess they're all like that. Well, that Mexican guy on TV is like that, or that trans person that I saw on the news is like that, so I guess they're all like that. So it's important when you're dealing with marginalized groups that you take the care to make sure that you're not engaging in stereotypes, ignorance, offensive language and depictions, unconscious bias, and other harmful choices. I want to highlight unconscious bias because unconscious bias is a sneaky little devil because it is unconscious. It's something that you don't realize is happening. And for that, I want to give you a little story. I was doing a reading an arc just as part of Book Sprout, you know, that thing where you can read someone's book and just leave them a review. This is from an author. I'd read one of her books before, loved her book, left her a review that she loved so much that she inboxed me and said, I'm so sorry, we're not supposed to do this, but this is the first review of this book I've gotten, and it's amazing. You picked up everything that I wanted the reader to pick up on, and now I'm excited for the book to come out in 2 weeks. So I read another book of hers. This is a white young adult author. In this particular scene, these 2 characters are going somewhere outdoors. It's a festival, concert, something like that. There's a line that says something akin to, there was raunchy hip hop playing on a car driving by. Now, for some people, they may just go, oh, okay, right on. There was raunchy hip hop playing. But for me, as a sensitivity editor and as a Black woman, I paused there. And I wrote her a note, a private note, where I said, I'm sure this was just a throwaway line, raunchy hip hop, but it had nothing to do with the story because I also checked that. Is this supposed to be some juxtaposition between the raunchiness of the music and the wholesomeness of the conversation? Nope, had nothing to do with that. So I said to her, when you have a throwaway line like that, in a context where, because let's be clear, even though not all Black culture is hip hop is Black culture. So when you connote the one, when you mention the one, you connote the other. In a story where there are no other Black characters or representations of Black culture, that is evidence of unconscious bias. I didn't call it offensive. I didn't call her names. I just said, I think this was a throwaway line, but here's what I want you to consider. Yes, hip hop can be raunchy, but so can pop music. So can rock music. So can the blues from what I'm discovering on Spotify. Also, hip hop is not just raunchy. Hip hop can be thoughtful. It can be romantic. It can be playful. It can be revolutionary. She responded to my message by hiring me to be one of her editing team because she said she just didn't see it. Now, mind you, what I thought was interesting is that nothing I ever read after that from her had anything like that in there. But that's an example of a throwaway line that's unconscious and that most of her readers would probably skip right by it because, well, what difference does it make what kind of music it is? But for someone that's on the lookout for things that are like, this isn't horrible, but it's also not necessary, those are the kinds of sneaky little things that can kind of slip in there. The last word I want to highlight at the end of this definition is the word choices. When we write our stories and we write our books or what have you, we have our drafts and we put words on the page and then we edit and we rethink and we revisit and okay, fine. But we do, especially when we're doing sensitivity readings, need to let the writer know, hey, you have the RIGHT to WRITE, whatever you want, but please be aware that every word you leave in the page, every word you leave there is a choice. I am making you aware of this. What you do here on out is your choice, but it is a choice. And I think sometimes just having that realization can sort of smooth the way to getting people to rethink things a little bit. So that is my mouthful definition of how I think about sensitivity reading, as it were. And I kind of wanted to start there and let y'all kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great definition. And I imagine that this is something you've built as you've been seeing what's coming up in literature. If you're not familiar with Denise's TikTok channel, and first of all, I want to thank Brittany Dowdle, who's the one who like poked me and was like, hey, heads up, this is someone you need to start following and you need to invite to the networking studio. So this was Brittany's idea. So I'm glad she did it. And I'm glad, Denise, that you were really open-minded to coming and joining us without knowing the first thing about what we were trying to do here. But I think, as we were talking before, as editors, the biggest fear that we have in all areas is of making mistakes. And how do we know what we don't know? And, of course, reading outside of our genres, reading different authors, reading the materials that are coming out and following the discussions that are being had. Your TikTok channel is really informative.
Thank you.
Not only about the books that you're reading, but the TV shows that you also watch and how you're seeing these character depictions. And I think, we have so much to talk about, and I definitely want this to be a conversation and open to asking questions. But do you have, I don't know, and this might be too broad of a question to ask, but for me, sometimes there'll be something that comes up that's a red flag. I know there's something wrong with it. I don't know what it is. I need to enlist help, or I need to pose a question in a forum, or with my trusted group in my mastermind group of kind of figuring out what is it that I'm not, that I'm not catching, those little red flags that sometimes we don't know how to keep looking into. And I think that's the fear that a lot of us have, is missing something. Like you said, that throwaway line went through another editor that missed it. It went through maybe some ARC readers that missed it. And then thankfully you were there and you picked that up and you saw. But do you have any suggestions or anything that comes up, that you're like, okay, if there's this happening, one of the videos that I was watching this week that you had was about the best friend character, the Black best friend character that's just there, and she has no backstory. She has she doesn't get treated like all the other, side characters. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, maybe?
Yeah, I think the reason that I opened the definition with it's a process is because there are things that I catch now that I wouldn't have caught 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I am a strong believer in, particularly in my comments, because I only work in Word, I don't mess with Google Docs or PDFs. I love Word, it's like a love-hate relationship, as I'm sure we are all very aware. But one of the reasons I love the comment feature is that I am quick to say, I was reading this line, this sentence, this description, and it gave me pause. And while I'm editing, I will leave a note for myself in bold, and I leave it in bold to make sure I go back to it and don't leave it in as is. But sometimes the note is something about this is sticking in my craw and I don't know what it is. When that happens, usually I stop what I'm doing. I look at what it is. Let's say it's a description of a certain character. And I'm like, is this offensive or is this just weird? Is it lazy? Like, what is it? And I will just look up the thing that's bugging me. So say, for example, they're describing, and I'm just going to use me. Let's say they're describing a Black woman and there's something about the description I don't like. Now I'm a Black woman and I've been doing this for a while. So I could just say, well, does that offend me necessarily? Well, that's not really the question, is it? The question is, in and of itself, is this okay? Is this intentional? Is this a throwaway line? Is this signifying on something bigger in the story? So what I do then is I go to my good friend Google and I look up describing Black women. And sometimes I'll read something that I will either agree with or disagree with strongly enough that I go, that's what's bothering. And then I'm able to say to the writer, hey, I read this word, this line, this is what it conjured up for me. I don't think your intention was that. Here's a suggestion of what I think might be better. If you leave this in, that is your choice. But I just wanted you to have the feedback on how I took it. I do that if I'm reading whatever the material is, whatever the category is. In the PDF, there's a list of different groups you should look out for if there's a character of this type in the book. And, you know, we live in the world, so we all know what marginalized groups are. Basically, people of color, people on the LGBTQIA plus group, disabled characters, fat characters, people who are not Christians. Now I'm a flaming Christian, but I do understand that because of how this country works, if you are not a Christian, there's a tendency for your beliefs to be depicted in ways that are ignorant or insensitive. So you need to pay attention to that. So basically, if you're starting a manuscript and there are certain characters that are basically non-white, or they're non-white, not cis het, there's an acronym somewhere, but it's basically those groups of people. You kind of just make a list on the side for yourself to kind of note anytime this character is on the page or being discussed. Because sometimes it's not when the character's on the page. We get careful then, but sometimes when the character's being discussed or referenced, something may slip in that the writer will go, oh my gosh. And again, this is why it's about encouraging. So you're not saying, aha, I knew it. I knew there was something there. No, it's not that. It's just, hey, in line such and such, you described her this way, but now in line such and such, you're describing her this way. Is this some sort of indication that her character is changing, or is one of these incorrect? Just want to bring your attention to it. I also am a huge believer, and you know, in full disclosure, I haven't had to do this, but if you've never sensitivity read before, it's kind of like something I said in one of my videos. If you've never baked before, you would probably not start with a croquembouche or your best friend's wedding cake. If you've never sewn before, you would probably not start with your best friend's wedding dress or your best friend's daughter's quinceañera gown. So if you've never sensitivity read before, it's okay. What you can say in your editorial letter or maybe at the beginning of the story, hey, I noticed you have a character who is in this category, or I noticed there's a big part of the story that deals with this event in history. I would suggest that you hire a sensitivity reader to see how these things land, because that is not my area of expertise. But I feel I would be remiss if I didn't make that suggestion. Because now, even just doing that much, you have helped your writer. And that's the point. Without putting this weight on you, like, oh my gosh, I have to catch everything. You can't catch everything. When have we ever caught everything?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not possible. So I think taking that weight off of ourselves to just say, at minimum, I can bring to their attention, this is something they may want to pay attention to. And then even for yourself, when you're making those comments, and maybe it's time to return the manuscript, you keep going back to this line and you're like, you just say that hot. So, hey, I've read this line about 50, 11 times. There's something in it. I don't know if it's the word choice. I don't know if there's an association with this word and this group of people, but something about it just doesn't sit well. You may want to get a second opinion, but I would suggest maybe you massage it or just change it to something else. Because in all honesty, I don't think writers are coming to us to be the end all be all most of the time. I think they just want someone to go, hey, this is okay. And so if at minimum you can just say, I think maybe you should do this instead, that can be enough.
Yeah, yeah. Can I ask you actually, one of the things you talked about, and of course this is coming from my own ignorance, one of the things you talked about in one of your videos was about giving every character, you know, the backstory that they need and making sure that it's equal across the board. And a lot of times, I don't specifically edit fiction, but I know many here in the group do. But many times, like you said, we'll bypass the stories of characters that don't reflect us because we're not paying attention. Do
Mhm.
you want to comment a little bit on that, on how to maybe enhance a character's, or how, I don't know if you want to comment on how to enhance a character's description or their backstory, but why it matters. And I think specifically I'm talking about the video that you discussed, and it was a TV show, I believe, where she had a grandma, or she had it was something about vampires, and
Oh, it was Vampire Diaries, what they did to Bonnie Bennett.
that
And I'm
one.
going to try to hold on to my decorum because there are a few things that rile me up outside of Nick from The Handmaid's Tale. Bonnie Bennett is one of those subjects. So let me remember I'm in front of people. The thing about, and this is very important to understand, the reason I go on about that so much is because in the setup of the series, one of the characters, Elena, is the main character. Bonnie and Caroline are her day ones. They are her best friends, which means Bonnie and Caroline are on the same tier in the story. But Caroline's characterization is a lot deeper and a lot richer than Bonnie's. Bonnie is the Black character. Now, if you're editing a story where the Black woman is a C character, she appears in less than 10% of the book and gets a handful of lines. I don't need to know all her business, but it would be nice to just have something about her, whether it's the fact that we always see her running because she's a champion marathoner. That's enough just to color her in, if you'll pardon the unfortunate pun. But it's not about giving us her whole life story, but we need to know that she's there intentionally and not to just be like diversity. So the way you do that is by thinking about who this person is in context. So, for example, if she's someone in the neighborhood, and I use this example in a different video, where if there's a Black character who's like the C-level character, maybe this person is the way that the main character knows whether or not they're leaving on time for work, because they know that this neighbor leaves about 15 minutes after they do. So he comes out one day and he sees her putting her kids in the car and he goes, "Oh my God, I'm late." It's a small thing. It doesn't like change the world, but it's a way of saying she's incorporated into the world in a way that makes her seem like a real person. And I think you can do that regardless of whether this is a primary, secondary, or tertiary character in your story. You just have to take a moment to just kind of think about it. I do want to address something that's in the chat because this is a great question. Do you sensitivity read for nonfiction? You absolutely do. And there's a slide in the PDF about that, but I will address it briefly here. Nonfiction is a bit different because supposedly it's true. So you can't just change the way things are, but you can look at language. Sometimes people, when they're writing certain, whether it's a memoir, let's look at a memoir, for example. In a memoir, the writer has the RIGHT to WRITE, whatever they want. So if they are telling the story about their racist neighbor or their homophobic boss, they have to be able to tell that story. If, however, you're reading a story where the point has been made and you're starting to feel like, okay, so we know that you're telling us this story, and yes, you want to use the words that the person used, but it's starting to feel like you're a kid with a toy and you just like playing with it. So now we're seeing this word or this phrase or this description more often than is warranted. That is something to bring up. There's also the way certain subjects are handled, because people, even in their fact inclusion and their truth telling, make sure that those facts are actual facts. Make sure the facts are facting. You may have dubious sources or biased sources. You may have indications where opinions are presented as fact. It's like, okay, so where are you getting this information from? Particularly if it skews to feeding into stereotypes and unconscious bias and other things, because those things show up in nonfiction, and arguably they're more dangerous because someone reading a book will say, oh, well, this must be true. Hence the education system in certain parts of this country where they're just saying, oh, slavery was a choice. If it's in a textbook, then who was a child to say, well, that can't be true because what you're telling me in my science book and my math book is true, so this must be true too. So you absolutely can and should sensitivity read in nonfiction, but it looks a bit different because you're more so just having the writer just back up what you're saying, looking at the language, the frequency with which certain things are used. I did a video once where I was talking about if you're writing a book that is set in, let's say, 1940s Mississippi. I would not have been a Black woman then. I would have been a Negro back then. And that's not an offensive term, it's an out of date term. Colored is another out of date term. So yeah, you need to use terms that are appropriate for that time period. But if the entire book, and this is also more fiction thing, but if the entire book is written in modern English, but suddenly you're just throwing colored out every time you can fit it in there, well, that's a red flag. Because why is the rest of the book modern, but this word is not?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same that comes along with uses of African American vernacular English. You see this sometimes with people who are from the South, where all of a sudden they can't find a G to end a word to save their lives, and there's all apostrophes floating all over the place. And it's like, okay, you don't need to do that to convey that this person speaks with an accent. I prefer to actually just use fewer words. Just like I'm not a native Spanish speaker, but I took it for a while. So if I was trying to have a conversation with an Hispanohablante, I would use the most basic words possible because that's how I approach language. And if
Yeah.
you think of it again, that it's a process and that you're trying to be respectful and authentic, then it's because some people do think, well, if I'm writing a Black character, they have to speak in African American vernacular English.
Yeah.
No, boo, they do not. And depending on context, they probably would not speak that in front of an audience of all people that are not like them because there's a thing called code switching. And if you don't know that, you have more research to do, which is
Mm-hmm.
another note that I have had to make, not often, but I've said, hey, I think you may want to do a bit more research on this because I feel like the inclusion here is skewing in a way that I don't think you intend. That's one of my favorite phrases. This is doing XYZ, which I don't think you intend. Because just in case the feedback has them going, well, what did you say? That phrase lets them know I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm here to help you. That's what I'm here for. So I don't think you intended this, but this is the result. Because it's not about, I can't control your intention. I just said this to someone yesterday. Readers don't have anything to do with your intention, they're only looking at the impact. So your intention is all well and good, but the editor is going to read your book and describe the impact. And if we stay there, we can leave it to them and the God they serve to deal with their intention because we can't see that. We can only see the words that are on the page.
Yeah. Excellent. I love this. Um, can I So there's so many ways that people, so many sources for sensitivity reading, so many ways of getting that information out there. One of the things I think that really sets you apart is that you have a TikTok channel that's very successful with a lot of followers. I would say many of us on this group here have thought about or have a TikTok channel that is just not where it's supposed to be or where we want it to be. Can you tell us, this is more than a question from a business perspective, addressing sensitivity reading, how you came about to deciding this is what I'm going to talk about, this is what I want to say, and how you've made it such a consistent. I went back to your first videos. So I went back all the way back.
Bless you.
I saw all of your
My
ABC.
ABCs of writing series. Yes, when I
Yes,
didn't
which I
understand
highly,
lighting.
yes, I highly recommend everybody check out. I thought that was a great strategy, and a great way to organize thoughts and to get content out. Can you tell us a little bit about how you chose this medium for you, why, how it's grown, what it's meant for you, how it's changed?
Oh, sure. So I went on TikTok initially because I am a talker. My mom has a cassette of me talking myself sweet when I was young. So as I said, will talk to an empty room. So as much as I enjoy making little images in Canva to put on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, by the way, I've never understood Instagram. I know I'm only 47, but Instagram may as well be written in Mandarin because I do not understand how it works. But I said, I like talking. The camera loves me. So I did my ABCs of writing series. It's 26 letters and it was about 26 videos, maybe 30 because I had a few other ideas. The problem was when that series ended, I didn't know what else to say. Because yes, I had people watching my videos quite regularly, but I didn't have any engagement. So those videos were done in January 2023 to about mid-March 2023 because I didn't do them every day. And so I didn't post on TikTok for about a year and some change because I didn't know what to post. And then I was talking to a friend of mine who is a queer romance editor They're a queer romance editor, and they also do queer, like detective mystery fiction. Brilliant editor. And they were telling me that they were going on TikTok, and I thought, you know what? There are billions of people on TikTok. And based on my editing schedule, in order for me to feel satisfied with how many clients I have, I only need about 3. So I started posting videos about, I want to say last summer, but last May, June is when I first started posting. And I committed to posting at least 3 times a week. Then I went up to about 4 times a week. And in a year, I had 1,400 followers, about 1,100, 1,400 followers at the beginning of April. Then I was in another group, and we're all writers, editors here, so I can share this here. I was in a group, and they were talking about, someone was reading an urban fiction novel, and they said that they don't like reading certain urban fiction novels because there's no editing, and it just feels like it's all over the place. There were some people who felt like, well, you don't need to edit urban fiction because you should just let the language flow. There were other people who felt like, well, it's still fiction and you still need an editor. So I went to TikTok and said, I believe that regardless of what you're writing, you need an editor. People kind of like that, but okay. But one of the comments was, how do you feel about white writers using African American vernacular English? And I said, that's the equivalent of someone going to dinner with their friends and they're saying, oh, we'll have mozzarella sticks and jalapeno poppers. It's very jarring. It's like the whole thing is written in standard American English, and then wham, the Black character comes on, and suddenly we're speaking AAVE. From that video, there were so many comments. What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? I didn't choose, there's a rap song that says, I didn't choose to rhyme, rhyming chose me. I didn't choose sensitivity writing to be my topic. I didn't even offer sensitivity reading as a separate service until 2 months ago because it was always part and parcel of my normal process. But there were so many questions from so many well-intended, good-hearted writers who were just like, I have a question. I've never had anybody to ask before. And so what would happen is I engage a lot with my followers. It's why I gained, I think I had, like I said, about 1,100 to 1,300 followers at the beginning of April. By the end of May, I had more than 10,000. And then for someone who only talks about writing and the occasional rant about television, I was really proud of that because it was reaching the right audience. So from a business standpoint, it really was listen to the market because you never know what's going to hit. And what I found is that, and I'm not going to say I'm the only one, but what I was hearing from a lot of my followers is I have not found anybody else talking about this and willing to do so in a forum like this. Because let's also understand this. And I've said this. I'm a Black woman. This is Howard University, by the way. I didn't graduate from Howard. I graduated from Temple, but Howard owns my heart, which is why this is back here. However, I was the only girl I knew at Howard who was blasting 90s country music in her dorm because I love me some 90s country. It's like my heart. I was the only Black girl I knew who watched Seinfeld and Friends and Frasier when everybody else was watching other things. Saying that to say, I've always been comfortable in other spaces. I am not one who gets worn out talking to white people about this kind of stuff. There are a lot of people of color who are just like, Google it and leave me alone. Don't ask me. I'm tired of doing that work for you. I am not that person. And I've said, I'm pretty impossible to offend because I realize that even if you're asking a question and the phrasing is off, the mere fact that you're asking, that you're coming to a public forum. Now, sometimes I do get inbox messages, but I'm so awed and humbled and appreciative of the people who will say, my story's about this, and I don't know if I should do this. Is this racist? Is this okay? Is this homophobic? Is this this? And I always say, thank you for asking, because we live in a really contentious, knee-jerk groupthink world now where, oh, she used this word instead of that word. That must mean she's a, we don't do that on my page. I don't allow that on my page. So what I would say from a business standpoint is I just listen to the community. What's funny, anytime I've tried to do something trendy, like there's a sound or something, the algorithm goes, no, ma'am, that's not why we have you here. Those videos go absolutely nowhere. where they're like, hey, do this and you'll grow. And the algorithm goes, no, not her. We need you here to talk about writing books and rant about TV, and that's about it. So my encouragement to you would be post what moves you. And also figure out what you can talk about authentically that actually gets you some sort of riling. Because I could be there like, so if you're going to write the Black best friend, here's what you need to talk about. That's not who I am as a person. So I am like, okay, listen, when we're going to talk about this is what we need to pay attention to, not that. So all of the antics make the content easier to digest. But again, this is what people wanted to hear from me. And so that would be my encouragement. Figure out when you're getting comments, regardless of what they are. If you're getting comments that are just like, thanks, oh, thank you for watching. Why did you comment or something? Because sometimes you just have to keep going because you really never know what's going to be the thing. Because I was telling my husband, I said, it's not that I don't like talking about this. It's just that I am an old school editor. I want to talk about plot and structure and character. But at the same time, these are real world issues. And really, I never run out of material because there's always someone who says something that makes me say, that's a new series. Thanks for that, because I didn't think about that aspect of it. And so that's kind of how that happened. Right now, I'm at about 13. I'm a couple hundred under 14,000 followers, which means my followers have I've multiplied more than 10 times since April. And it's only because people can tell, and this is what they say. I would never say this about me, but this is what they say, that there's a combination of learnedness and compassion because they know I'm not going to flame them on my page and I won't allow anybody else to either. So it's a safe space. And even when I get to ranting about The Handmaid's Tale, one of the things I say is, if you're happy that Nick blew up in a plane, get thee away because you can go elsewhere. This is a safe space for those of us who want to mourn the crime that the writers of The Handmaid's Tale committed against those of us who have been fans of the series so long. So it's not just about, I don't want dissenting opinions. I love debate. It's how I learn. But if you're just here to be contrary for contrary's sake, do that elsewhere because that is not how we do things here.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think the takeaway that we've talked here at the Networking Studio a lot of times is that sometimes you have an innate talent to talk about something, to showcase something, to teach something. And even though that might not be your first service that you're offering as an editor, maybe that's the one that's going to get you the exposure and the recognition and the vetting out there. Anybody that needs to vet you, to believe what you're doing, that will lead to the other kind of work as well. So
that is exactly right. Because a year ago, I would be on LinkedIn and see other editors say things like, well, it's only April and I'm already booking into the fall. And I'm like, the fall? I'm not booked in the next week. Now I am booked through the fall. And I have people who are, and I'm double and triple booking myself because there are people who want to work with me now. And one of the things my husband said is, we realized that it's exactly what you said. There's a shortcut now. Because before I was a faceless editor with a website, I mean, a very cute business name, if I do say so myself, but that doesn't tell you anything about who I am as a person. But when you're seeing my videos, it's like now there's a shorthand. Now I do have, and I wanted to get this in there, I do have a bunch of Google forms that I use for different things. There's a client questionnaire that every client who wants to work with me has to fill out. But I also have a sensitivity read questionnaire. I have a consultation questionnaire. And so in that, I get to learn a lot about them because they already know something about me. If you're going to offer sensitivity reading, I would highly suggest that you create a form that allows the writer to tell you everything about their project in terms of the title, the genre, the word count, and that kind of stuff, but also what drew you to this subject? What are you most proud of? What do you enjoy the most? Why are you seeking sensitivity editing? And be as specific as you can. What do you want to feel? Or rather, what do you want from me? Because sometimes people are just saying, I'm writing this story and there is an autistic Mexican character, and I had beta readers and everything. I just want to have somebody else check it. So if there's anything, even about another character that I didn't mention that you think I should be aware of, let me know. That's this person. There's also this person. I've been told that I need to have a sensitivity read, but honestly, I like the book the way it is. Very different animals. So what do? With this person, you have to get clarity. So you may need to have a follow-up discovery call where it's like, okay, so what do you want me to do? Do you only want me to co-sign that everything's fine? Are you interested in feedback, and how much feedback? Do you want me making suggestions, or just saying, you may want to change this and leave it up to you? Because you have to get a feel, because all of you are different editors. You edit different genres and you do different things. I am a fiction and nonfiction editor that does developmental line plus copy and copy editing. So you throw it at me, I can edit it, because I need that variety to tickle my brain, because otherwise I get bored. So it doesn't, I'm not swayed or concerned or even anxious, regardless of what manuscript is in front of me. But there was a time when someone came to me who wanted a sensitivity read on a book, a novel. And this woman was writing about 1920s Louisiana and some aspect of the culture. And I read her message to me, and I had to say to her, respectfully, you know more about this subject than I do. So I am not the person to do this for you, because I don't know enough, and I would be doing you a grave disservice because I don't know enough to tell you if this works or if that works. And I apologize for that. But I'm also okay saying, this is out of my depth. You may want to find a different editor. And there's nothing wrong with that, because there are people who love the services you provide, and a way for you to go forward that allows you to still do what you do in a way that resonates with you and a way that you can do well. Because to Linda's first point, you don't want to feel like you're making mistakes. So one of the things I wanted to suggest, if you've never done sensitivity reading before, is decide what you will perform sensitivity reads on, whether that's a genre or a certain type of person. As I said before, I am a Black woman. I'm also a mother of 3 autistic children. Now, because I've been doing this for a while, there's very few things I don't feel I could provide a serviceable working sensitivity edit for. But if I got a form back and someone mentioned something where I was like, yeah, that's a bit beyond my expertise, I would just admit that. But the first thing I did was look at my own life. Look at the people I have around me. We all have personal circles. I mean, this is a very diverse group, but does your personal life look this diverse also? So then you think to yourself, okay, well, I do know someone who's in this group. I do know someone who's in this group. Okay, what have you studied before? What have you worked on before? Because maybe you've written a book or studied something before that'll give you expertise in this niche area. And then we also have to talk about our own biases, don't we? Because we all have things that we don't talk about at parties that, we kind of feel that we don't realize are in there. And so maybe that's a thing where, well, maybe I'm not ready to edit that yet. And that's okay, because again, that's between you and your browser. But we have to start with an understanding of, yes, sensitivity reading is important. Yes, it is a thing. But how can I, being who I am on this date, with the knowledge I have right now, what's the best way for me to approach it? I might be at a point where all I can say, and this is no small thing, as I mentioned earlier, is you may want to get a sensitivity reader. You may also be a person who says, well, you know what, based on my own life experience, yeah, I feel like I could provide a good sensitivity read for someone who's written about this. And there's no shame in that. You can have a goal that, okay, it's August 28th, 2025. Maybe by April 1st, 2026, you may study up and decide, I want to be a sensitivity reader in this area, because maybe this is something that matters to you, because we all have things that matter to us. Injustice is everywhere, but there's certain things you may hear a story and think about it for a month. That kind of thing, do some research. And that's my next tip. I never do any sort of editing without a browser open. And not only do I Google, not only do I read blogs, I'm the queen of the comments, because there's what the person said initially, but then there's everybody else's feedback. TikTok is great for that. There's a study that someone recently did where they said the Gen whatever this is uses TikTok like Google now. And I admit I'm on it often enough where when I see something like not Taylor and Travis getting engaged, because that came to me directly and I freaked all the way out. But for other things, when I hear something, I'm like, well, what is TikTok saying? And I go there and then I Google it to see how they marry up. But the comment section, for as much as it can be a cesspool, depending on what video you're watching, there's a lot of good information in there. I also go to Writing with Color, which is a Tumblr page, but it's also writingwithtumblr.something.org. Not Writing with Tumblr, girl. Writingwithcolor.tumblr.org or .com is a great resource. And it's not just about color, that's the name. But there's so many articles there about so many things. They even have a section where they have different people, and they don't have a lot of them, but they have different people from different groups just kind of answering questions. Oh, I love when I see this in fiction. This boils my butter. This is a tradition in my family. This is something people think is true that is not. This is something people don't think is true but is. So that's kind of how I approach it, just making sure that I can do as much research as I can to give the author as much info as I can. But at the end of the day, their name is on that book, not mine. So I'm giving them the best I can. And I have no problem saying, you know, the feedback is the feedback, but and I said this in a video the other day. Sometimes when someone asks me a question on my channel, my answer is you need to Google that. And it's not to be snarky. It's because we all have to have that process. You Google something and you get 4 answers. It's like I did a video on how to write a fat character. And one of the first things I said is, if you heard me say that and you're already kind of like, excuse me, that's okay. Because there is no universally accepted term. So someone might hear fat and think it's okay. Someone might hear fat and be offended by it. So what do? You have to do what you think is right for this character. You have to do what you feel you can justify if you ever have to. But if there is no standard, I don't think the care is in the word choice. The care is in the characterization, because you can research the word choice to the cows come home. But if the character is being marginalized, if they're mistreated, if they're written in a stereotypical or offensive way, it doesn't matter what words you used, because their characterization is a much bigger problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much to digest and so much to like dissect and take home. And I know the rest of us, we're all going to be sitting on this all day, marinating and realizing what we need to be doing. One of the things that came up for me as you were speaking about this, Denise, was how easy it is to get lazy as an editor, and maybe a project comes our way and we're like, oh no, we're not the right fit. Instead of taking the initiative of being challenged and being like, okay, why am I not the right fit? Who either, is it something that I can learn? Is it something I should be doing? Is it something that would be best suited for somebody else? And so I think the more we know ourselves as editors and the more we know what kind of work we're trying to book, sometimes it is a good idea to pass it on to someone else that has that little expertise. But a lot of times it's also good. You could pass it on, but you could still challenge yourself to look into that, to, like you were saying, Google it, find out all the perspectives, read the comments, just to be informed. So
because there's always going to be a first one.
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
always going to be a first one. Now because here's the other thing. If you edit this particular genre and there is a type of character you've never seen in a book before or just never encountered before, that's one thing. Because it's like the concentric circle theory of culture, where you're in the center and the more rings you go out, the more different they are and the less familiar you are with it, which makes you more likely to kind of want to shy away from it. The same principle applies to our work, right? So I don't read horror. I'm not into horror. I don't want to edit history because I wasn't there, and I'm not checking dates and whether cobblestones were invented. I'm not doing all that. So if someone brings me a historical horror novel that has a trans autistic cyborg in it, I'm going to pass, because that's too much difference. If someone's bringing me a contemporary romance with a trans character, I've never edited a book that had a trans character. Actually, no, I did. But before I did that one, I'd never done it before. But I'm saying, well, I understand contemporary romance, and I understand how to write a character respectfully and authentically, even if I've never dealt with this character before, with enough time, because that's another thing. Give yourself more time. If you're
Mhm.
unfamiliar with this genre or this type of character, give yourself more time,
Mhm.
because once you've done the first one, you will take so much care and you will learn so much. But there is a difference between, it's kind of like when I watch cooking shows and they do something that infuriates me, where they're like, I'm going to take a risk and try to make risotto in 25 minutes. That's not a risk, that's stupid, because the math doesn't work. That's not a risk, that's dumb. Taking a risk to edit something you've never done edited before, but scaffolding yourself with the resources and the time to do it properly, that's a smart decision.
I love that. Scaffold, I think that's the mantra for the day, scaffold yourself, or for the
Mm-hmm.
week maybe. So I love that. So it is 10:23 in my neck of the woods. It's 12:23, I believe, no, 1:23 over there.
Mm-hmm.
Can we open it up to questions, comments, feedback? Who wants to go
Please
first?
do.
And please introduce yourself. Tell us what city, so that Denise can know what city you're in and what kind of editor you are before you ask your question. Brittany, I'm so going to put you on the spot.
I'm I'm trying to unsilence myself. First of all, I just wanted to say, well, first, I'm Brittany Dowdle, and I'm a freelance editor. I'm based in North Georgia, about 2 hours north of Atlanta in the mountains. And Linda and I have worked together for a long time, and I know, I think most everyone here pretty well. But I just want to say one thank you to Linda for for reaching out to Denise, because I kind of got Linda into TikTok, and even though I don't post or anything, I find I learn so much on there. And so I told her that she had to start watching you. And thank you also, Denise, for coming, because I think that I love the way you explain things. And I thought that the way you explain things, especially, is unique, especially on TikTok, but also the way you speak to fiction writers, because I think that there's not necessarily enough editors who are communicating to fiction specifically in that way. And it's very helpful. I like that you look at things from an encouraging standpoint, because that's kind of how we get progress. So
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I don't have a specific question, but just thank you.
Well, thank you for watching, because otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Oh, that's true. That is a little bit true too. Anyone
Yeah.
else?
And it's okay if you don't, because someone once, it might have been Joyce Meyer, who said that sometimes when someone gets a lot of new information and the speaker goes, "Are there any questions?" And you're kind of like, and not in a bad way, but there's just so much churning around that you can't
Yeah.
formulate anything. So my DMs will be open. I don't know, people say that, but it's like, it is like my DMs are open, and the form will also, the PDF will also, oh, I can do that now. The PDF will also have, let me not be
Your contact
technologically
info.
challenged. Ooh, child, how do I do this?
Yeah. So today, even though at the networking studio, even we haven't specifically addressed sensitivity reading, we've talked about it a lot in our forums or chats, or sometimes in our group coaching sessions. This is really meant to be this conversation, to be like, okay, what do I need to learn still? What do I want to know? What kind of work and scaffolding do I, need to start setting up for the future? And what I really want to encourage you is, who do I bring into my circle that wants to be a part of that, or that can help with the scaffolding? Because a lot of times we don't have all the answers, and it's impossible for us to have all the knowledge. But God, does it feel good to be able to reach out, for me, to Brittany and to people here in our room, be like, what do you think about this? What am I getting wrong? What am I not seeing? The whole thing about what am I not seeing is so important. And this is such a safe forum for us to be able to ask those questions, because there are no wrong questions. And
Absolutely.
language has changed so much in the last few years. And just so everyone knows too, so I'm Latina, I'm South American mostly, and I see the conversations that are being had, that are not being had, that need to be had. This past weekend, we had some Italian friends over with us for the whole week, and I was a little bit appalled by some of the conversations that were in terminology. And I was like, no, 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 no. And they were like, oh, but it wasn't my intention. I'm like, oh, don't even get me started on intention. It is not about what you thought. And so we were having these really great conversations. And so I've mentioned this before, a lot of the stuff that's happening in the US or that we're doing here in the US and these difficult or challenging conversations that we're having, it still hasn't taken off in other parts of the world. And so
Mm.
what you learn now can be applied to so many clients outside of the US as well. So don't think so local or so maybe US focused, even though your clients might be here, because you never know where the next client, the next publisher is going to come from, who they're trying to reach out to, or who they need, on their team. These are conversations that are going to keep happening going forward in other cultures as well and in other languages as well. So I think, Ebony, you had a question about separate images on download or a PDF. Oh, there we
So
go.
what I added to the chat, because I am not technologically savvy, it's one of the reasons my business works, because I need my laptop, my Chicago Manual of Style, and time. So what I was supposed to have done is taken this zip file and attached it. If that didn't work, I will send it to Linda after we're done, and she can distribute
Disseminate
it.
it. Yeah, yeah.
I was going to say
actually,
disseminate, and that felt weird.
yeah, I think I have it. Let me check. Yeah, I have it here, and I can definitely post it along the recording in our circle space. So,
Okay.
any other questions for Denise? Any comments? This is your chance. Don't be coming to me next week and be like, oh, you know what I wanted to add?
You sound
I'm
like me when
kidding.
I talk to my children. I'm asking you now. Don't ask me later.
Yeah, no. I know we're gonna come back to this. Anything else,
Yeah, can I just
Adam?
throw a quick question in? Yeah, I'll just hi,
Yes.
my name's Adam. I'm a developmental structural and copy editor in Wisconsin. Thank you so much for your time and insights, Denise. This has been super, super interesting. I guess I don't know if there's a short answer to this or not, but I'm kind of curious. I'm always interested in matters of prioritization with editing, and I'm curious if you have thoughts on prioritization. Like, assume you have a client who's like very game for the sensitivity read. The manuscript is just like rife with sensitivity issues. How do you how do you put that in a manageable way so that you're not just completely overwhelming the client? Or do you not worry
I
about that?
actually I actually just had a client like that where she and her husband co-wrote a book. And when she told me, her words, not mine, when she went to a writing conference where, writers were allowed to like meet with editors to try to make a potential connection, she said that she handed her manuscript across to a Black editor. And when they found out the premise, they closed the manuscript and threw it in the trash and said, you should probably just not try to sell this, because she was writing about a time in history, and she took the perspective. She was writing about an African set. The story was set in Africa. It was a war story, and it was set in a certain time period, and the protagonists were British. And when she was trying to explain the plot to people, they throw her manuscript out. So when she brought it to me, I said, well, I'm game to do a sensitivity read on it. And I did. And what I told her was, here's the thing you have to accept. The premise of your story necessitates certain things. I'm not sure who your target audience is, but in order for you to write this story, you're going to have to engage in certain language. You're going to have to present the African characters in a certain way. If you are okay with that, and your target audience is okay with that, then write the book you intend to write. But if you don't want that kind of feedback, then what you need to do is you're going to have to revise the book heavily. And we went back and forth after the sensitivity read was complete. And what I told her was, I am not telling you what to write, but I also don't know respectfully who the target audience for this book is. So you have to first know that. You have to make sure that, yes, you're telling the story you want to tell, but presumably you're telling it for an audience. I can't imagine anybody who looks like me who would want to read this book, not because it's not well written, but the subject matter isn't something we want to cozy up to. But if there is an audience and you want to tell this story this way, and you believe, because she did have a point, her point was, I know it looks bad at the beginning, but this character, the African character who seems like the villain, is not actually the villain. There's someone else pulling the strings. I said, well, see, now you're getting into a different aspect of why this is a problem. So you may have to dismantle your entire plot. Whether you choose to do that or not is up to you. But if you have an audience who wants it this way, then rock on. But what I cannot do is kind of give you any sort of pass in the sense that it's not that I'm even offended by it. It's that this is sometimes the premise is the problem. That's one of my favorite phrases. I use it sometimes with my writers, regardless of what the genre is. Sometimes the premise is the problem. And what you're trying to do is keep this problematic premise, but also almost govern how the reader is going to feel about it. You don't get to do that. You can only control, as I said, what's on the page. You can't control how the reader feels about it. So when the issues are that large, as I said earlier, it's not my job to tell you what to keep or what not to keep. You are paying me for my expert opinion, and I am giving it to you. What you choose to do with that information afterwards is between you and your keyboard. And that is not only, it's not a dismissive, well, whatever you want to do, but it's more of a, it takes the pressure off me to feel like, well, I'm editing this book and I don't want, I don't want to be associated with this being out in the world. Because I did also tell her, because there was a side order in her request to work with me, which was she was hoping that having me as her editor would assist her in getting someone to want to publish it. And I said, so let me see if I understand this. You want to attach my name to this known problematic book because you value me. That doesn't seem very respectful, that you want to embroil me and my brand in whatever your book is. I haven't heard from her since then, not in a bad way, but I gave her a lot to think about. She said she was going to revise it. She said she was going to rethink some things. Whether or not she does that is up to her. But it's the only way, regardless of how we're editing, it's the only way for us to do this and sleep at night, because it's not up to us what our writers write. And my husband did say to me, let her know, do not, because I have an attribution clause in my contract. If you're going to attribute the editing, you say, sensitivity reading by Prose Without Thorns. I told her, madam, do not put in there that I read, because yes, I performed the read, but unless you're going to say sensitivity reading by Prose Without Thorns, I didn't take any of her advice, but she did read it, because people don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I read it. It's like when Alexis from Schitt's Creek said, my critically reviewed short-lived reality series. I mean, critically reviewed is not the same as critically acclaimed, but she said critically reviewed because it was in fact critically reviewed. So yes, your book was sensitivity read by this company. You just didn't take any of their advice. So that's the shortest answer I can give to that question, but that's how I approach it. Because sometimes the issue is bigger than, like if I'm leaving comments, and I do, by the way, I say this in my editorial letter, we are blind to our own work. It's one thing if I say this issue is pervasive. It's another thing if there are 15 comments in the manuscript talking about it. Now, you might be annoyed, but I always explain the reason why there are so many comments. Like right now, I have a sci-fi novel or a fantasy novel that I think is about 74,000 words. There are 500 comments, and it's a developmental. And I tell her the reason there's so many comments is so you can see how many times I had this thought, how many times this occurred. Because if I just tell you this is a pervasive problem, well, my pre-reader didn't catch it, my mama didn't catch it. But if you're like, oh, this is like how many times she left 14 comments about this one issue in this book. It's the only way sometimes to convince them. And I also say, I don't expect you to deal with all of this at once. You have to prioritize what matters. But I did not want you to not know, because that's really our goal, is to give them the information for them to decide what to do with it. That's really the best we can do. And that's really all we're supposed to do.
That's excellent advice. That's really, really good advice. Before we go, Denise, Ebony converted to a PDF, so it's in the chat. I've downloaded it and I'll upload that as well at the networking studio. I wanted to remind everyone too about some upcoming things that we have before we go, because we're definitely past our time, but this has been fascinating, and I can't wait to see the conversations that are going to spin off from this today. Next week, everyone, we have our group coaching session on Thursday. We're going to be talking about some proposed topics that came up, I guess, in the last co-working session. We have our one-page marketing plan book study group also coming up on September 4th. We have a co-working session on September 18th, and on September 25th, our guest speaker is Denise Cowell. And we have another Denise, right back-to-back Denises. And I'll send you that information too, Denise, in case you want to join us. Denise Cowell is also amazing. She's based out of the UK. But thank you, everyone, for making time to be here today. Denise, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing all of this great insight that you have. Again, this is the first, I hope, of many encounters and the ways our paths are going to cross. Denise's information is there if you want to contact her. Please contact her, follow her on her TikTok channel. I am going to convince her that she needs to extract all these videos and write a book about them, and just use these as transcripts for her next book.
It's in the queue. Like, writing a book is in my queue, but this is a good problem to have. I don't have time to write because I'm editing so much.
Yes, but we need that book out there for sure.
Ma'am.
Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
everyone. Have a great rest of the week, a great weekend. It was great seeing everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank y'all so much. Bye.